See, we'll see how we can work with web services. So, when it comes to web services, we have two parts. Web services always uses the client and server architecture. Let's say web client and web server. Means why do we need to use the web services? Why don't we can to go with the file or FTP, SFTP or JMS or any application connectors? Yes, there are some instances where you may need to interact with the other systems. Let's say you and if you are implementing anything, any other than the web services, you have a control of when to start your process. Then if you wanted to start based on scheduling base, you can configure scheduling. Or if you want to start your process on some kind of event based, that event based technology will or JMS or something. As soon as some particular message available on some particular queue, the process will be starting. So instead of that, this is the one more thing called web service. As the name suggests, a web service, it means you will be creating entire your functionality as a services. Under one services, you can have multiple functionalities. Maybe you can just consider each functionality as a one interface. Let's say one of the simple service will take the customer service. Customer have there is a two features it is providing. Let's say what are those two features called get all customers and get customers by ID. If you want to retrieve all the customers, yes, we can use it. Or else there is a get customers by ID. Let's say this is a customer service sample service and it provides the two functionality. What are the two functionality? Get all customers and get customers by ID. If you wanted to provide these two operations and you let's say another application team, maybe the PHP team wanted to be use the service, or let's say any payroll processing, you wanted to use your functionality, and that functionality for, getting your the data to be processed, for giving all the customer details or some each customer by ID, you maybe need to do some other manipulation, or you may need to connect to some endpoints to pull out all these details. But instead of you exposing all these details to the PHP guy, what you can do, you'll create a web service and you just give a one URL to him. Web service URL. You just let's say that my web services will be accessible at this particular URL. You can just trigger this URL, you'll get a response. You just tell them, but how we can do this thing? What is the advantage of over implementing the web services? The advantage of web services is, first thing why we go for web services, what web service will not create any logic for you. Whatever the existing logic or whatever the logic you want it to be create for this interface, that interface will be make it available on a web service. Through web you can access that entire functionality. That's the only web service will be doing. But entire how you wanted to execute, that will be again, or the way how you are developing a process, that will be again same. Only thing is, if you are implementing web services, if your process uses the web services, then it can access the flow by the through the internet. It means, let's say whenever PHP guy wanted to trigger, he can trigger a request so that my process should be deployed on my atom. So when the PHP guy trigger a request, in this case PHP guy would be a client and Boomi will be a server. The client sends the request, Boomi will be accepting the request and then process and execute your entire process, and then finally after executing you send a response. You send a response back to the PHP. So this is how the advantage over this one is, doesn't matter which technology you need to doesn't matter whether PHP should be available on which platform operating system and in which platform it is running, the one thing. And whenever PHP guy wanted to use your functionality, PHP guy don't need to understand anything about your Delbumi. Not only Delbumi, any technology. It will be independent of the technologies. Means even the technology independent as well as its platform independent. So you can give your functionality to anybody, they can call whenever they want. So they are asking you to trigger and process your thing, we give it to him whenever you want. He can manually trigger it or he can configure in his application to send an automation request. So this is the main thing, why do we go for the web services? Now each and everything the moving the trend to web services, because let's say Flipkart. So the Flipkart server is somewhere and we just accessing from here, because it's all the services will be accessible through the internet. So the same way we are using web services here, and now there is a two parts here. As I told you that Delbumi can act as a client or can act as a server. So let's see one of the example when Delbumi can act as a client. The example I just give you the PHP I wanted to be use the Delbumi web services. In this case, Delbumi is a server, Delbumi is a server, and PHP is a client. So whenever you have a client, whenever you have a server, then Delbumi wanted to be act as a server. It means what? Each everything entire thing will be available in process only. But which connector you need to use? There is a one connector called web service server connector. You have to configure this web service server connector in start shape only. You can see one of the connector here. Let's go for connector connection. You can see the, I think you cannot create a process here. I'm just creating a test process just to show you the web service server connector. Web service server connector. Okay, web service server connector. You can see this is the one of the connector you need to use whenever you wanted to implement a Delbumi as a server. And this web service server basically what it will do, when client sends a request, it will receive the request. And for sending the response, there is a one more activity we have here is return document is here. This is the return document is basically sending the response back. See, in this case, let's say PHP is a client. Is a client sending a request to web service. How you can implement these things in web service server connector. When client sends a request, it will reaches the Delbumi server. Delbumi server will be receiving the request here using the web service server connector. And for sending the response, what exactly it will do? It will send the response. It send the response through a return document. Whatever the information you say you are looking from the Delbumi, you will be sending a request. That information will be sent it back with the response. That response will be sent is the return document. This is how. But there is some instances where you need to use Delbumi as a client. Delbumi as a client. Another application. Let's say you wanted to send some of the SAP system. Let's say you wanted to send all your customer data to the, you wanted to extract, and then you need to do some validation and then transformation, and then you need to send this information on hourly basis to your SAP system. How you are communicating with SAP system? Instead of you directly communicate with the connector, you are directly communicating with the web services. Every hourly base, let's say every hourly you need to run your process to get all the customers data which are updated during the particular time, and then you need, if any customers updates are available, then you need to send this data to the SAP services via web services. In this case, Delbumi is a client. So which web services, which connector you need to use here? In this case, Delbumi is web service client connector. These are the two connectors. Basically, it will be deal with entire web services requirements. Want to implement your Delbumi as a web service server, as a server, web server, you need to use this one. If you wanted to call one of the web services from the Boomi, means here you are just consuming here. Delbumi just consume the SOAP web service, SAP web service. But here Delbumi exposed Boomi process as a web service. So both are different. Now, so let's say how the web service, okay, let's say I'm telling the client sends a request to the web server. But how does the client know at which point the web server is accessible? And how many number of features this particular server is providing, and what is each request and response. All this information, whether it's a two-way communication or one-way communication. When it's a two-way communication, client sends a request, server sends a reply. One-way communication means client sends a request, that's all. The server will accept the request and process it. Server will not, doesn't send any response. This is one-way communication. But how will I get to know at which point the server will be accessible, and how many number of features it is providing, and what is each and request and response structure. To implement all, to get to know all this information, we have one more thing called WSDL. This is what? Web Service Description Language. This is also again an XML file. This WSDL, basically WSDL describes web service. It gives the complete information about the web service. This is metadata file. So let's see one of the sample. WSDL. This is how it looks like the WSDL. And one thing you need to remember is you no need to get any WSDL. You don't need to create any WSDL. Delbumi automatically generates a WSDL for us. In the next session I'll be showing how we can create a web services. First we'll see how we can consume a web service. It means how we can work with web services. So client connector. So first I wanted to, before getting into this, I wanted to give you some more information about the basics about the WSDL. See, this is how the WSDL looks like. The WSDL is also an XML file. You can see this is a XML tag is there. And the next thing is WSDL should be having only one element called definitions. It is giving some basic info about WSDL. And the root element should be a definitions. And after you expanded it, what and all elements will be there. You can see the types here. Why do we need the types? If you wanted to specify for each functionality, there should be some request. There should be some response. If you wanted to mention request and response, there should be some structure will be defined. This is what we can call the XML schema. As we already discussed long back, XML schema basically used for generating an XML profile. This is how it looks like. You can create all your schemas and you can create all your structure. So what I am doing here is, we have a, okay, let me just explain it for you and then I have all these types will internally refer the messages here. I can define one message for request, one message for response. I can define one message for request, another message for response. I can define another n number of messages for the fault. Let's say in the two-way communication, client sends a request and server will not able to process your request, maybe because of your insufficient data. And then server should send a response unless and until everything was success. But if server, in this case, server did not process your request successfully because of, let's say, insufficient data. In that case, server needs to send a response, but this response will be the fault response. So in that case, we need to define one more structure called fault. You can have any number of faults you can define. Let's say one is parsing is failed, another thing is validation is failed. So you can define any number of faults, but only one request and one response will be there. The response only will, and faults we can define any number of things. If web service process successfully, then you will send the response. Otherwise, you will send the fault. Okay, now let's see. We already see the why types is defined. The type will keep all the structure will be defined. That structure will be referred in WSDL messages. Why do we need this WSDL messages? When I say when this particular WSDL, it implements two features. What are all two features are there? These are the two features. Get all customers, get customers by ID. Get all customers, get customers by ID. Means these are the two functionalities this particular customer service is providing, features are providing. So for each, let's say if I wanted to get all customers, I should be having some request. That request will be solved with this one. And this one has one more response. If once you client sends a request to pull out all the customers available in your system, and if you want to send that response back to the client, you need to have some response structure. That response was this here. And this is all this. Once you create a message, that message will be keeping, you are preparing it here. This is what your entire operation. And one thing you need to remember, each and every operation, okay, each and every operation in Delboomi, you need to have one process. That process should contain a start with you should be configuring web service server connector. It means client sends a request. There should be some process where actual business logic should be executed. For every operation, there will be one Delboomi process will be created. For this, in this case, this will be your request and this will be your response. For defining request and response, we will basically get the message type. And if you see one more operation here, get customers by ID. For this one also we have one request message, one response message, and you can have faults. You can declare any number of faults. But this to put all these operations will be organized in a one element called port type. Let's say maybe you are keeping all files in different folders. Maybe how you wanted to organize each file in different folders. That depends on you. So here also we can define port type. Port type is just enclosed in this. It will not have anything. But how, by looking at a WSDL, how I can tell that whether it's a one-way or two-way communication? If you see input and output, it means a two-way communication. This operation also two-way communication. This operation is two-way communication. If you see only input, then you can see the one-way communication. Okay, then fine. I have the, now I know what is my message structure and how many features are provided by the service, and other thing is what is whether it's each and every feature is a one-way communication or two-way communication. In web service terminology, feature is nothing but it's one operation. So now, as of now, I know the way how many by looking at WSDL. It means if I wanted to get all this information, I should be having a WSDL. Yes, by looking at WSDL, I'll be having the information. What is my request and response structure for each and every operation that service will be implemented. I have this one. And one thing I just need to left here is where and all your service will be running. Where is exact service will be running. Let's say this is your service will be running. Once your application will be deployed, your service will be accessible under here. When you just send a request, client send a request at this URL, the service will be listening it, keep on listening it. So this all information will be stored in the service. Okay, I think you just try to understand. If not, it's okay. Okay, now I wanted to call a web service. Now in this case, I wanted to implement. This is a scenario I wanted to implement it. Then we wanted to consume a web services. It means I have to use the web service source connector. As I told you, if client, if your in this case client is Belgium, if Belgium you wanted to call any web service, what and all you need to have where exactly your service will be accessible and how many number of operations it is providing. Means that means all these details will be available in a WSDL. So means you need to get must and should you need to get a WSDL from the server. Server you need to get WSDL, that is mandatory. So let's see, instead of we implement a web services, I'll show you the web service implementation in separate session. First thing is we'll see how we can call the web services here, how we can consume web service. For this purpose, I am using public accessible web services. If you want to search any public accessible web services, you can just search in Google public web service registry. Public web service registry. It means all these services will be available here. Click on this one. When you click on a web service, right, you'll be having so many web services will be there. All these web services will be available on the deployed on the public cloud, maybe public. You can access these web services. You can send a request to this web service and you can get a response for these web services. So let's say one of the web services I wanted to go is customer web services. But what I told you, I need to get a WSDL. If there is a two ways to give the WSDL. One is directly giving entire this WSDL file to you, entire the WSDL file to you. And there is other thing for clients too. There is one more feasibility to whom this will be accessible. This will be accessible only for the server side guys. Server side guys has to provide these two clients. And there is one more thing, instead of the sharing entire this file content via an email or any shared drive something, they will be giving you the one URL, they will tell you that URL to use that URL to download this file. This is what we can call it as an endpoint URL, means where exactly your service is available. For this endpoint URL, you just need to give question mark WSDL. Means when I click on this question mark WSDL, this is my actual endpoint. As my endpoint, click on WSDL, this one URL. Since question mark WSDL is basically it will you are requesting to give entire your WSDL information. Okay, let me copy this entire WSDL information. Let me copy entire this WSDL information into one file. Click on. Let's go for view page source. View page source. What I done? Just click on right click and view page source. You'll get this window will be open. Now let's copy entire thing. Copy Control C and then paste it here. Now you know somewhat basics. Now let's see what and all things we have. Type something. We have so many things here. Okay, we already showed what is port type. How many operations it is implementing? Create, get all. These are the three operations it actually provides it. And for each operation, what is the structure? This is the structure and this is the request and this is the response. For this one, get all request. Okay, ENS get all means it is referring the get all. And what is the response? Get all response. What is the structure? It's referring get all response. So this is, and where exactly your service is accessible here? Under service, you can see this is actually here. So to get this entire WSL content, what we have just used it, www.predict8.com 8080 CRM customer service question mark WSL. It means if you wanted to check whether your web service is running or not, your web server is running or not, you need to just use endpoint URL, then question mark WSDL, then question mark WSL. When you click on this question mark WSL, endpoint URL plus question mark WSL, if you are getting a WSDL, it means the web server is running. This is the one shortcut to verify how the web server will be running or not. This is a shortcut. So that's the reason always even they will be giving you the option to download it. Okay, now we have a WSDL. Now we'll go back to the process for calling this web service, how we can call this web service. Let's create a process, web service consumer, web service. We can create. Now let's take everything is default. You don't need to do anything. And then, as I told you, if you wanted to call any web service, what you need to use? Web services. So client connector. Let's drag and drop web service. So client connector. Let's click on connection. We need to create a connection now. Click on plus. As I told you here, this is the two options here, WSDL URL and SOAP endpoint URL. Why do you need this WSDL URL? WSDL URL to load entire your WSDL structure. To load entire your WSDL structure. Want to load entire the structure? We can give this URL. We can give this URL. So the most cases, the endpoint URL will be without WSDL. But this is only to just configure for operation. You need this one. This is not will be used for running. This is a mandatory parameter you need to use it for running. When you run a web services, it actually this particular connector sends a request at this URL. At this URL. So this is only just for configuration purpose. It will use it. And if any, as I told you, if any certificates will be accepting your web services, that's we have seen some of the certificates here. 509. You can create the certificate and you can browse the certificates here. And there is a two ways to put more secure. One is the username and password based authentication. Username and password based authentication. And other thing is you can use the certificates. Certificate is more secure than username and password, because if you know the username and password, if somebody knows the username and password, he can trigger a web service. But how the certificates will be giving the more secure? Basically, certificates will be generated per servers, and certificates will be having all your information. So only information in the sense it will be having a host name, all these things. Means when you are sending a request from your system, means you will be your system, means you will be sending your system information, and with that system information will not be available on the server, and same server also will be having the public and private certificate. So server will be having the private certificate, and they will be giving for all the clients to public certificate. Only thing here, the certificates will be different. Earlier we saw the PGP certificate, now here transport level certificate. SSL nothing but secure socket layer. Means you whatever the layer you are using, you are making secure. So if you are, let's say if I am sending a request from Delgumi, it will send, if I use any certificate, the certificate will be having the system information. Even from which host it actually sending a request, that also will be captured. That particular host is there. It's a allowable host from the server end, then only it will accept it. Otherwise it will not actually reject it. So that kind of a more secure will be there because of the certificates. So if you are, but if you are using username and password based authentication, but if you know the username and password, I can call that particular web services from any system. It is not kind of a system based. So if you maybe one of a good example, if you are booking an IRCTC certificate of call ticket only from one host, they can just only give some particular maybe 3 or 4 tickets max. After they will not allow you to book more than one ticket, more than 4 or 5 tickets per call from same system. they will do this kind of authentication from which system you are doing all this system information will be grabbed. Okay, now if you don't have any security, so as of now we see there is no secure for this web services. It's just a sample web services. You can see here interface. In web service technology, we can call it as operations. These are the number of operations we already saw here. Now we'll be going to use this is the operation. We'll see how we can configure it. Even you can go for endpoints where exactly the service will be running. All this information will be there in WSDL. We already downloaded the WSDL from the ORU. Any dependency, dependency graph, customer search. Add dependency. I don't think it's anything. Events. Okay, so what are using it? You can just see the options, how many days the service is been up and running. It's available always 996% is available. Other time is 5 years, 20 days. What is this next? Number of times. You can see that ping interval. Every 10 minutes will be getting one request. Okay, we don't need all these things. Now we will configure the process. Let's give rename this process. Save and close. Let's click on operation. This operation is specified. Let's say the connection specifies what is the endpoint URL. In the operation out of this available endpoint URLs, you may need to use any one of them. Wanted to use all, you may need to copy the web services soap client connector those many number of times. Let's say I wanted to call the get all connector action. And so far what we have seen, how to create an XML profiles manually, or maybe using some XML profile or some XSD or some XML or XSD. But let's see for web services how we can automatically generates a WSDL structure automatically. You can see the object in the sense operation name, which operation you wanted to call the web services. This is not an editable. How this particular things will be editable? You can use the import wizard. Click on import wizard, select the atom, select the local atom, choose the connection. You may choose the connection in the sense basically it will be having the endpoint URL. When I click on next, it will try to connect to that endpoint URL. If that endpoint URL is accessible for your Boomi atom, then it will try to list out number of operations this particular service will be supporting. Let's try. If this is not connected, then we can see other option, alternate option is there. Either we can directly in the connection we can give the endpoint URL. If this particular if this particular service is not up and running, then this window will not show. In that case, what you need to do, you can use a one more option to read the same WSDL file from the local system. I'll show you that one also. Let's see what and all services it will be implementing operations. These three. I wanted to call this one. Next. Now this time when I click on next, what it will do, it will connect to the get all operation and it will try to import the metadata for what is the request and what is the response. Each and request and response will be getting one profile will be getting generated automatically. You can see that. If you click on page, what is the object you selected? Get all. What is the request profile? This one. What is the response profile? This one. Click on finish. You can see that object is automatically configured here. And request profile is this one. Response profile is this. Okay. Now Okay, then click on 7 close. Yes, we configured, as of now we configured the connector. Let's parallelly we can use. There was a one more tool, SOAP UI. This is widely used for working with web services or HTTP request. This is an open source tool. You can use this tool to trigger a web service request. You can use this one for debugging purpose also. So I'm just downloading this one. Download SOAP UI. Why do you need? Don't need pro version. You can go and download the basic version. Download. So here Windows installer 6 version. Okay, let's set. Okay, meanwhile we'll just configure our process. Here I'm reading. Okay, now let's put this in. Now we need to send a request. What is the request here? This is an operation. This is your request. Trying to load sometime. It is load it because we are using some internet parallel. Yes, it's loaded. Now you can see there is only one object element type get all, and basically it means for this web service we don't need to send any request. It will get all the responses. Okay, now click on close, okay, and then try to run this web service. Click on test. Okay, now it is installed. Let me install it here directly. Use this. Click on run test. What exactly? Unable to create an envelope. Okay, cause by line number 1. Signature end of file means it's not properly able to generate it. Not properly able to generate it. Means like I think maybe you need to so we have not even though they don't require any parameters, even though it don't require any input parameters for this particular operation, still you mean to say that you just need to put select this element and then put dummy element. So this makes just nothing you need to pass. This makes it envelope will be get generated. This structure will be get generated. Means we need to send a dummy request, right? The dummy request nothing but we need to send an envelope but without any data. If you don't make that change and the parameters get all and then static value, it won't generate any empty data. That's the reason I think it looks fail. Let's try this time now. Okay, run SOAP UI is installed. Okay, now let's parallelly we'll see. Yes, this is a service. They actually you can see one of the value. What is the value we sent? You just sent a static value empty. So null value it sent. What is the response actually it has? It has returned the data. Let's see what is the response here. Let's click on, and if you want it, okay, you can't download original file. You get entire data. And there are certain tools where it will be make your data pretty print. Pretty print means by looking at this, you don't able to understand. By looking at this, where exactly a particular element will be started, where exactly ending, not able to identify properly. So for that, what we can do, go first showing folder, then open this notepad++. One thing what we can do, if you install a plugin, I already showed you how to install plugins. Just go for pretty print, XML only with line breakups. It makes you much look good. So this is it means it has a multiple customer information. Multiple customers. If you want to see how many number of customers, control F, click on count. 9 matches there. Why I need to count this manually? Can't we directly count using any process? Yes, we can use this process. We can use this. So what we can do? Why do we need uh, count manually? We can use the count. So how we can count it here? First thing is go for data process. First thing is if you want to count, we cannot directly count it here. So first thing is we need to split a document here. Because if entire all the customer information we are getting in one document, that's the reason we are actually going with splitting. Otherwise, if already multiple documents are coming, then we don't need to go for splitting. Now we'll be having web services get all response here. What is the element you wanted to split it? I want to split based on customer. Now let's run this same process. Okay, how many documents has come here? Some 9 documents were there. One, hold this, and then selected 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. Okay, 9 are there. And then I wanted to use there is a predefined property will be there. Let's go for custom scripting here. Custom scripting. By this time the custom script executed, split documents already executed. It means you already have the multiple documents are available. For this multiple, how you can view the document? You can see the get data count, get number of documents that are being processed, get number of documents that are being processed. Now I wanted to return the number of documents. I wanted to store this number of documents in a property file. If I have a property, I can directly use the set property for defining a property. But how do I define a property in the scripting? How do I define a property in scripting? For that, just go for process properties custom script. Document properties, scripting context. Here some examples they given is how we can access here node get data method provides the count of number of documents passed into this step. This may be helpful in initialization of logic. Okay. I wanted to see how we can set the properties here. Document properties, process properties, accessing the scripting. Yes, I wanted to be this. So if I wanted to set process property, I don't want to use the process property. I wanted to use the dynamic process property. This is the one. If I wanted to use this one, set dynamic process property with the value of count. This is the property name. What is the value? And this is basically the persistence, means even though your process runs, if you don't want your variable data process property data to be cleared out, if you don't want to clear the data, then you can need to use this option called persistent. It means the data will be persistent. One second. Sorry, actually, see, this is the one we need to set it, how we can set it. So if you wanted to store your process property data, even though after your process execution completed, then you can just enable true. By default, what happens that when you define a property, these properties will be stored while your process is executing, and after your process execution has been completed, your variable data will be cleared out. So there are some instances where you need to use storing this property. Let's say one of the example is there is some predefined processes now they are giving from the Boomi for replicating the data from success factor to Active Directory. Let's say Active Directory, the common scenario is as soon as one employee gets hired in Employee Central, as soon as one employee get hired in an Employee Central, for that particular employee, there should be in user ID. What happens that when we onboard one, as soon as one employee gets onboarded, he'll be getting assigning on system. Means his username and password, his username should be given in their enterprise network. So that's what we'll do with the LDAP. So as soon as a new hiree new hiree available in Employee Central, we need to get his account will be gets created in LDAP server, the company network. So the LDAP is a protocol. So it means, but this is the thing. Whenever you run this process should be able to identify how many number of things. Let's say your process was run today, and after run today, maybe in the tomorrow or day after tomorrow, you maybe 2 or 3 resources will be onboarding. But when a process will be scheduled for every 5 days. So if and this time you need to only search for the new hires from the last 5 days. Means you will be having that when was your process was last run, the last run date will be persisted with this thing. That the last date time when was actually a process was run. From that particular to the current date, total will be 5 days because we will be setting process to run every 5 days. So because of that time, whenever you wanted to persistence, and when your process will be triggering for next time, it will store the last execution time, and from that date onwards, it will pull all the new hires. It will just verify whether new hires are available from this during this time. So let's say if you wanted to call this one, right? Wanted to set or retrieve, set or get anything. Set is basically storing a value, and get is basically to retrieve a value. Okay, and you wanted to use any of these things, you just need to use the import this one. Import always should be in first line. And then what I am doing here is I wanted to set a dynamic process property here. Dynamic process property here. You can set anywhere, even you can set here also. You have to keep it here because you are using get document content. So for here, what is the property name? I wanted to only customer count. This is a variable name I wanted to be defined. Okay, let me store it here, and then I want it to be customer count. So what is the value? For that value, this is the value. Means this is a particular method. It will give me the value of how many number of documents are there. Do you want to use a true? No, I don't want to store persist this property. That's all we need to do. So what I am doing in the custom scripting is I am just trying to set one of the proper dynamic process property, and this dynamic process property I'll be looking into here. Let's see the value, what exactly we are getting dynamic process property. Dynamic process property. Not this one, this is a property name. So here we'll be calling a web service. On the web service we'll be getting multiple customers in one document. We are splitting each document, and then we are running, we are executing the document count here, and then we are storing that information in here. I think somewhere here you can see that now 9. Okay, we actually got it. Some method signature was correct, not correct. Consumer document completed with error. Error executing data process caused by no signature of the method static. Form.boolean execute set dynamic process property is applicable for argument types string, and then integer, and then boolean. Customer count 9. Okay, this is string. We are actually getting a string, but I think this is right. If you see, this one next argument should be integer. I think this is not coming an integer. This is coming as a string type. That's the reason it was giving. And then last was boolean. Yes, we are passing a boolean. I think we'll just change that to we'll just define one variable. Let's edit this one. If you want to edit, you can go here and edit this. I wanted to store one defined here, int I equal to. Okay, for this I am just putting entire this thing here. I'm just storing in integer type here. I'll just refer entire this part with I. Now let's try to run this process. If you don't want to execute all these things, right? What we can do, we can put entire these things, copy, and we can configure this in another one also. But in technically, we don't need to put these many data process. Custom scripting, search it less. I think what exactly it is giving. Set dynamic process property, customer count 9, and then whatever we are doing correct, property name, and then property value, and then true. Yeah, this is correct. Okay. What is the error we are getting here? No signature method. Signature method means still it is not converting. This is not converting here. I think what we can do, we can just use the into in Java. There is one method called parsing somewhere here. We just use the this is the one we need to use it here. Okay, we'll just pass it here. What I am doing here is just entering here. I'm just using this as a docs. This is a type called string. I'm just showing it string, and then after that I'm converting this into this is a doc. This value I'm converting into string. Let's see, still we are getting an error or not. Now we have given only 2 of my something. Why we are getting all this errors? Okay, if this run, let's close the session. No signature method. This. And for this, Control X. Yeah, this is only the signature only. What we can do, or else even there is a one more thing what we can do is, even we can count 1 plus 1, 1 plus 1, 1 plus 2, 2 plus 1, 3 plus 1, you can keep on execute, even you can keep on run your process to be count. So in that case, we can just use this one. So even you can count in map also. I think we already have this map function here. Then if you use map, just need to use XML response. This response you need to use the different functions. I think we can use the because I think we already you have this function in place. We're just adding it. Just adding it this one here. So the similar logic we need to do. What we are doing here, shipping cost, whatever the value was there, just getting it here and then adding it here. So we'll just add the total here. Always this would be 1. We just map it here and then we can set this property. So how we can get each of the things? We have the one function called count. I think numeric somewhere we have the count. There is this. So we are directly we are mapping this to. So we have mapped for shipping total. We have mapped the shipping total. We have mapped the count function here. And finally, our output will be there in shipping cost. See, I have earlier what I have done for shipping cost, I map some value. So I directly map to map that. But now this time I am just mapping the root element. Means I wanted to count how many number of customers there. So I just use the count function, and then I can directly use the wanted to map some data here. It's taking time. You can map it some of the things. That will be sufficient. We just map. Just putting it here. What is the variable data we are actually storing that information here? Shipping cost. We just map the shipping cost here. I'll show you this one how we can work with scripts now, because I'm giving this information. You can just see each and everywhere. You can just see the count 9. 9. Number of document was 9. And there was one more small thing, just 5 minutes I will take it. Sometimes what happens, right? Let's say your client will be designing a web service. Client will be designing his web service, and he cannot share the endpoint URL for getting your web service. When the web service, when your web service will be running here, web service is deployed and web service is active, and therein, then only you will get the web service here. Web service will be running here. Otherwise, your web service, he cannot give the directly URL to get to download your web service to WSDL. He cannot provide you the URL to download a web service if it is in development phase. In that case, what you can do, you can just give some the entire WSDL in a file. Let's say, where is that? Let's say this is a file. Say Control S. I wanted to save it some desktop customer.wsdl. In that case, file path to clipboard. In that case, how can I point my web service server connector to read the data? This is a path of, so you need to specify, need to create one more WSDL here. Sorry, create one more thing. Let's create one more thing. So for the WSDL URL, you need to specify the file here. File. After that, you need to give triple colon, and always you have to make sure this replace with this because Java in Java all these backslashes will be a escaping character. So that's the reason we have to give it like this. And this endpoint URL will be again. So we don't need again the endpoint URL for the importing profile structures. Doesn't matter. Let's see without giving the endpoint URL we'll try to. Only thing is if we could be able to import, select the atom, local, and this is the new connection we just created. And then if you just go here and try, you should be able to list out all the things. Unable to browse the connector, unable to read WSL from URL. Correct only. Where do we have connectors? From here we will just go with the technology web service server connector. Inside server connector we'll just go for the process. Yes, here. Maybe we connect right jump to here. The technology web service so client connector. Why it is not scrolling down? The connections. So client connector should they remove this functionality or what? Should be able to. I think these two things I'll show it tomorrow. It's already late. What are the two things I need to show? Only thing how we can the custom script need to work, make it work, and the other thing is this one, how to read a WSDL from the file. These two options I'll show it. But what we learned today is how we can call a web services. If you want to call a web service, you need to have the web service endpoint URL, and then how we can configure the web service with the website with the WSL, how we can imports we can generate the XML profiles, how we can generate an XML profiles. These two things we will learn today. So in the next session, we will see how we can create a web services. Okay, let me just stop it.